up tomorrow at 7:30 West
This
Coast
meeting
time.
is being recorded.
There is a link to the ICUJP. It is a webinar that is taking place 7:30 Pacific Coast time, and we will have a slideshow that I put together of that event. And
Let
we'll
me
be
just say, if
talking
I
about
might,
that in detail.
let me say, if I might, Vinny, we're
Please,
getting
Jim.
on at 7:30, but I know that's an early hour. And I don't think the actual webinar itself will start till about 8, because this is a religious group. There's going to be some preliminary work done. So if you didn't tune in until 5 to 8 or 8 o'clock, you wouldn't miss anything. So if that
And I
makes,
also believe Stephen's going to make certain that it's recorded as well.
yeah,
There'll be an opportunity to view it at a later time, and it'll include a 3-minute, very brief slideshow that the pictures that Ann and I took when we were there and other things that I found
Excellent.
for that
is
event.
that part of your presentation?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And
You're showing that to us tonight, correct?
if you would like to see it, I can show it very easily.
Okay.
I
I
just
vote for
wanted-
that. But
I just
Hold on.
wanted to say in response to someone's question, do you hear me?
Yes,
I
we hear you just
Oh,
fine.
okay. That someone did take a video of the entire chain circling both sides of the fence, across both bridges on either side of Parliament. Did the entire loop around. So there are videos of the entire.
Hey, I'm going to ask one favor of everybody. If you are not speaking, and if you wish to speak, raise your hand. Please mute yourself so we don't end up with errant noises from the background.
And also, if I may say, just in terms of the meeting, when we get to the point when Vinny's through, people have some questions, we'll take a minute. And we're also going to have a broader discussion at the end after a few presentations. But if there's a question that you can't wait on, just raise your hand. I'm sort of an idiot. And so it'd be I can see you, and that would be easier than me trying to figure out chat rooms and things, which I always seem to muck up somehow.
So
Yes.
that was the event in London
Jan?
in brief.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Jan?
And you'll have to speak much louder if you're muted.
Everybody's muted.
I'd like to say something that's been worrying me for a long, long time. When this first happened with Julian Assange, I looked up espionage and it said spying on your own country. And I thought, great, he's not spying on his own country. We can't in any way arrest him for espionage because this is not his country. I just looked up the definition of espionage again, and it says spying on a government, any government.
Yeah, that's right. And it's more
How did
complicated.
the definition change? That's so.
Well, it doesn't so much that it changes. Tomorrow, by the way, Marjorie Cohn will be explaining a lot of this stuff. So let's wait till then. Okay, Vinny, go.
Okay,
Continue.
so in brief, and we will show the slideshow here shortly once we can wedge it in. But I'd like to talk about something else. You'll see behind me, and many of you are here due to Roger Waters' concerts. He had a 34-city tour across North America, which included Canada and Mexico. And I was lucky enough to be the coordinator for much of that tabling that we had across the country, and as I said, in Mexico and Canada. He provided us not only an opportunity to be within the venues, to speak out and to leaflet people on the plight that affects Julian, but also during his multimedia show in word, song, and image, he presented a very, very strong case for Julian, along with a whole host of other political things that he spoke on. He showed a portion of the collateral murder video, and of course, he mentions Chelsea Manning by name, he mentioned Julian Assange by name, and he has a 50-foot electronic banner that spun around the stadium that said "Free Assange." And the crowd cheered at all the venues. I had an opportunity to see that concert something like 5 times. And I was at several of the concerts in Northern California, here, Salt Lake City, and several other places to make certain they went as planned. And it gave us an opportunity to reach out to people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, literally, that we would not have otherwise. And this is the genesis of this meeting tonight. that we wish to take and throughout the country create mini chapters of Assange defense so that we can take direct action. And as a preview of what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, in June here in Southern California, the Assange defense here took part in the People's Summit. And I won't go on at length here, except to say that it was 3,000 people from all over the world that showed up, and ardent progressive activists. But when we talked to people in their 20s and 30s, the first question we asked them was, do you know who Julian Assange is? And I was shocked, but not surprised to know that the answer overwhelmingly was no. And that's because Julian, for most of those people who are in their 20s and 30s, has been incarcerated, whether in asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy or in Balmash prison for over 11 years. That's half of some of those people's lives. And he has been essentially erased from the public discourse unless it is vilification. So our first focus is going to be obviously getting as many groups across the country as possible and to make people aware of who Julian is and the threat that his prosecution with the Byzantine Espionage Act. Jan, you are absolutely right. This doesn't make any sense. This is like something that would make the Queen of Hearts and Alice in Wonderland blanch. If you've read Nils Meltzer's book, The Trial of Julian Assange, you will see what a travesty of justice Julian has faced from the get-go, and it continues further. However, the Biden administration, with the stroke of a pen, could end this. And so our focus is going to be putting on pressure. And one of the things we're talking about is direct action. And that includes people getting arrested. I have already volunteered to do that, and I'm hoping some of you will join me around the country so we can finally get the press to pay attention, because Julian is not alone in this accusation. The entire concept of investigative journalism, the bedrock issue of freedom of the press, is what is on trial. Because as Barack Obama and his administration correctly said, we face the New York Times problem. If they convince him, convict him of these 17 charges of the Espionage Act and the hacking charge, it spells the end to freedom of the press, because they can charge any journalist, not for creating harm, not for lying, but for telling the truth. This is the first time that a journalist will be convicted of a crime. And I believe that covers what I wanted to do at the opening here. So Jim, I kind of jumped on your bandwagon. So why don't you go ahead and give a pitch for the event that Stephen Rohde has invited us to. Thank you very much again, Stephen.
Yes, there's Steve. Yeah, tomorrow that we were suggesting you might all want to tune into, and I was suggested, if you're like me and don't like getting up before the sun does, that that you could join us more like at 8 o'clock, because between 7:30 and 8, it will not be the seminar itself. It'll be some other business of the organization, but beyond by 8 certainly. And if anybody doesn't know how to do that because they haven't gotten, I think, Dick, is there a way for you to simply send that link to everybody here?
Actually, the link is in the chat.
The link is in the chat. There you go. All right, the link is in the chat. And what we're going to do tomorrow is the broad topic. Well, the question that we sort of start off with is, why is it that Biden is continuing with the prosecution of Assange that Trump started, that Obama set aside, but now Biden's back to, with all of the implications of all of what that means for freedom of the press. And so freedom of the press and Julian Assange is kind of the emblem of what's gone wrong with that is our talk tomorrow. I give a very brief introduction, and then as the moderator, and then we're going to hear from Marjorie Cohn for about 15 minutes. Marjorie is an international law expert. She's been very active with us here locally. She writes often for Truth Dig. She's written books, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she just knows this stuff. And I've had her on our radio show a lot. And she'll be talking, really give you the overview of the whole legal case, where it stands. It's kind of complicated because of the various appeal processes in a case like this and so forth. So you'll learn all that tomorrow, where it stands. And then following that, we're going to hear, as I recall, from, is that your next Vinny, I think, tomorrow, aren't you? I don't have.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Vinny is going to talk about, he's now the director of organizing and for the National Defense Committee. So he's going to talk about some of the organizing that's been done, some of what we envision for the future, no doubt including ideas you may have today, and the worldwide movement in defense of Assange that has grown up, and of course why that's so critically important. And then Gary Shankman is going to join us. He's an attorney of considerable note. He was one of those who testified at the Assange extradition hearing way back when, seems like 100 years ago now. And he's written this marvelous new book, taking a look at the repressive nature and how the extradition, the Espionage Act of 1917 has been used over the last 100 years or so for bad purposes, of course. Following that, I think then Steve Rohde, am I right, Steve? Where are you?
Yeah.
Then Steve Rohde, I don't know, what has Steve got to say ever? No, then Steve, tell us what your topic is, Steve.
I'm the cleanup hitter, really drawing out the threat to freedom of the press.
Right.
It needs to be elevated. I am putting up this extraordinary book that Carrie Shankman has written, A Century of Repression. You should add it to your book list on Assange. There's a full chapter on Assange, but really the history of this oppressive piece of legislation. And then we'll move back to you, Jim, for what everybody can do about this.
Well, yeah, and also questions. I mean, time permitting, we assume that, well, I'll get the hook whenever necessary. Time permitting, we want to hear from you as to what questions you might have.
So Jim,
yes,
we do have a question from Robert Corsini.
Robert, okay.
Yes, I just want to actually just a little piece of information that I want to share with everyone here, because I know there's some new people here, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
the organization tomorrow is actually kind of important. Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. It's not so much as necessarily a religious organization as an interreligious peace organization.
Yeah.
It's an interesting distinction, but it also represents an opportunity for us to broaden our base of people who are aware of the issues inherent in the Julian Assange case. So I just want to let people know that's what the organization is tomorrow, and why it's worthy of your time and effort to jump in and participate.
Oh, thank you. It's an organization that, and you're raising your hands as well, Peter? Or were you just adjusting something, Peter? I guess Peter said was just adjusting something.
Just adjusting something.
Okay, that's fair enough. All right. The next item.
So Jim, so now we turn it back to Vinny, and we're going to talk for half an hour
Right.
about the various activities that have been going on, both with our local Los Angeles group and all across the country. Back over to you, Vinny.
And let me just urge you in that regard, Vinny. Yes, because we do have new people, it's certainly good to give in broad strokes at least, the kinds of activities that have been going on without necessarily a laundry list of all of them. Because I want to, the main purpose of, at least my main purpose in wanting this meeting, and I think the rest of us from Los Angeles, was to hear from some new people. You know, we're running out of ideas. So we want to hear from some new people as to what you think we might do, what interests you, maybe why you've decided to join this call today. That may give us some ideas and some inspiration. So we want to make sure we leave time for that. So Vinny mentioned some of those new ideas you and I and many others have been kicking around.
Well, I'd like to start back in 2019 when our group was first formed. A group of us got together, which included Gary Shankman and Robert Corsini and Dick and Jim and I and Marjorie, Barry Pollock, who is Julian's lawyer here in the States. Oh my God, the woman that wrote Assange Defense Law, Margaret Kunstler, and a host of other people. We met and we put together a teach-in at the UCLA School of Law on a very rainy day. And we talked about a host of things. And we were beginning to take action by writing to the British officials and so forth. And since then, our group, the national group, and then the groups that are peppered throughout the country have done a series of webinars, protests, and actions. Many of them, for example, standing out week after week. Our Boston contingent stands out in front of Merrick Garland's house, asking him why he is furthering this prosecution, writing our senators, writing our congressmen, and whatnot. But the unfortunate thing, if I can go back to the People's Summit again, is the fact that Julian is absent from the mainstream press. And so in the last meeting we had of the National Brain Trust, and that is the people that are funding this, Nathan Fuller, I'll mention Nathan Fuller, he's the head of the Courage Foundation, is our titular head of Assange defense, was the idea that we need to be taking a more direct action so that we cannot be ignored. That could mean having yourself handcuffed to the offices of CNN or the Department of Justice in your own neighborhood. But it starts with getting people who understand and see this threat as it is and sharing that threat with other people. Unfortunately, part of the problem is Julian by himself is a polarizing figure, not because he has done anything wrong, but because there have been so many lies and misrepresentation. The people that should be our natural allies on this, the Democratic Party, despise him because they erroneously think he cost Hillary the election, or that he worked in collusion with the Russians, or that he is a rapist, or any of the other things that have been disproven over and over again. And rather than go at length here, if you simply go to the AssangeDefense.website and look at all the lies against them, there are bullet point explanations which poke a hole in every single one of those lies. But I don't care if they were all true. The truth is that if this were, quite frankly, Tucker Carlson that were facing these charges, I would be fighting just as strongly against them. There are many people who are on this call who are members of the ACLU. And the ACLU is not an absolutist organization, but it does recognize the notion that freedom of the press is not for freedom that we like. It is especially concerning the speech that we find most odious, because if we can stop anyone from speaking, the next person they'll stop is you. And that is the case with Julian Assange. This case is a direct assault on freedom of the press. And so what we want to do at a very basic level is every time you meet someone, ask them that question. Do you know who Julian Assange is? And if they do and they don't like him, ask him, why should you care about Julian Assange? Well, we can tell you why you should, because if he is successfully prosecuted, it spells the end to investigative journalism and freedom of the press as we know it. So our efforts are consciousness raising with as many people as possible, and then looking for ways above and beyond one more webinar, one more meeting. What we want to do is find a way to move the needle to get CNN, NBC, ABC, Fox News, any media outlet to begin to pay attention to us. I'd like to go just for a moment back to the hands around Parliament. The BBC wasn't even there. 6,000 to 10,000 people standing around Parliament with many people, many Parliament and former Parliament members speaking out passionately, and they did not choose to even cover the event. Reuters mentioned a brief few lines, and they mentioned several hundred people there. So it was less than accurate and certainly less than was required. So we have to find a way. We have to find a way to get the press to pay attention. And in Europe, where Anne and I were, in England, as a matter of fact, or the European continent, he is much better known than he is here, and the case is much better known. But the fight for Julian's freedom begins and ends in the United States, because although the British court is operating in a reprehensible manner, they are the quisling to the United States government. They are operating at our behest. And therefore, it is incumbent upon us to lobby our congressmen, lobby our senators, lobby our assemblymen, lobby our city councils, our
Who are
county
not
councils.
our tribal members. If
And-
you,
James, could you do me a favor and mute? Thank you very much, James. That we need to find a way to raise the alarm in as many places as we can. And part of the reason for this meeting this evening was not for Jim or Dick or any of us to go on, but to open the floor to you, to ask you, what do you believe we can do in your neighborhood, in your locale, to do exactly what I just said, to raise the alert so that our citizens know when we raise a loud enough clamor that we can't be ignored.
And
And
let me make sure, by the way, because I don't know everybody on the call. I don't want to put, make this long, but is everybody aware of why Julian is in the situation he's in? I mean, he published lots of stuff the government didn't like, of course, but he exposed graphically and sometimes with film the war crimes committed. I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
that was Jim. Jim, mute yourself.
Oh.
Oh.
That's Jim Nacella, not Jim Lafferty. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I'm just he had films actually, but he exposed the multiple war crimes of the United States and our allies in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and of course, now that was done by Daniel Ellsberg, and we know what happened there. But the noose has tightened on the press since then. Daniel Ellsberg, by the way, along with Noam Chomsky and Alice Walker, are the co-chairs of the National Defense Committee, so they know about this. So that's why you can explain why the BBC, which generally has a better representation than American press, didn't cover this historic, I think, unprecedented gathering with parliamentarians and others surrounding that 3-mile circumference of the Parliament buildings. So in case anybody was wondering what that's about. All right, with that having been said, the discussion is now open. As to ideas, what either have you done that has been successful in your, like Anne and others I know have had successful event that you'd like to let the group know about quickly? And are there people who are maybe fresh to this? Don't be shy. Don't think, well, these people know this. They know about what have I got to say. Hey, if we had all the answers, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight.
Jim,
because
Brenda has her hand raised. Let's give her the floor.
who's got it? Where is it? Oh,
Brenda.
there you go. How you doing? It just says connecting to audio, but go ahead, Brenda. And then John.
Yes.
Brenda, can you hear me?
No,
There
it's a
we are.
mistake. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to raise
You
my
didn't mean
hand.
to raise your hand.
I'm
That's okay.
great.
John
Okay.
Krapner. Go ahead, John.
Can you hear me?
We can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can.
Oh my gosh, I'm on. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly toss out a few suggestions. Was it this past April when Adam Schiff was speaking at the Los Angeles Times Book Festival, promoting his book about how he heroically stood up to Trump. He went on a bit about how glorious the US because of its tradition of freedom of speech and the press. So I went up to the mic and I said, well, since you feel so strongly about freedom of the press, how would you feel about, helping Assange fight extradition? And he goes, oh, Assange, I don't like him because he laundered Russian-hacked emails about the DNC. I went forward to the mic. I said they were leaked, not hacked. I'm not sure if he didn't hear that or if the mic didn't pick it up. But so just sort of challenging politicians in public like that, I think, is one idea. A second is, I don't know how many people on this call are familiar with what's called freeway blogging. I have a photo of a kind of freeway placard on my computer, although I don't have the technical smarts to know how to introduce it into this discussion, but that's another thing. And then a third thing that just occurred to me, and then I'll pipe down, is in terms of looking for ideas. I don't know if the New York Times or any other American papers won Pulitzers because of the Assange revelations.
They did.
Okay, but then perhaps one thing that might be sensible to do is to start a campaign calling on them to either cover the Assange case or to give back their Pulitzer. Having said that, I'll pipe down.
I love
John,
it.
an excellent
Hold
suggestion.
on.
Thank you very much.
Hold on. Claire is next and then Quanta. Claire?
Okay, so I just wondered if anyone has ever made that point that the congressmen and women would not have learned about so many things had Assange not revealed them. And maybe somebody needs to tell them or remind them that they were in the dark about a lot of the stuff that they just didn't know. And therefore they benefited by knowing this.
Absolutely.
So they should know that, and they should be behind not extraditing him because it will kill him. He's very ill.
Yes.
Yes.
And their cruelty should be emphasized. I mean, where does their compassion ever get shown? They just have no heart whatsoever. He suffered enough. If they want to punish him, he's been punished. And he can't do any harm now. And also, the president of Columbia University is a free speech expert, and you might like to consult with him or talk to him. Although I did hear him recently at a commencement, and he said that hate speech and speech that elicits violence, it should not be considered free speech.
Well, we can argue about that, but I think your point about Assange stands despite that. Quanta, go ahead.
Thank you. You were talking about how we can make this more visible in public eye, and I think we in the peace groups and in groups like this, we are neglecting the fact that the youth, the young people in colleges, that's really where we have to start, because let's face it, we're all in here, like I'm in my 70s and we are the 60s people, and we have to help them to carry the torch, and we're not doing that. So I would really recommend find young people's groups and then really teach them how to carry on the torch, freedom of speech, and worrying about peace and crime against humanity, because I think that's what war is. We're not doing that. And we have to find a way to address it, because they are very much into technology. So we have to find them where they are and then give them the message that they can hear. I just wanted to share that.
No, thank you. And we have made some very modest, not sufficient outreach to some of the anti-war groups, because much of why Assange is in the trouble he's in is because of what he did around the wars. And, I know I've interviewed, we've had people at our webinars, like Medea Benjamin and others from the anti-war movement. But that's a very good point. And I'll just throw out there, but I want to get to the next speaker. We're also thinking about reaching out to journalism students, especially. Dick, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to address exactly that. I mean, Vinny mentioned that early on we had our first event was a teach-in, a live in-person teach-in event at UCLA Law School. Then we moved to webinars, and I put a link into a long list of webinars, half a dozen of them that our local group did. And now we're thinking maybe of moving out into live events again. We have a real strong connection to USC Law School and USC Journalism School, the famous journalism school. And we did in particular do one webinar that was very much directed at young people. It's called Repressing Free Speech from Hip Hop to Julian Assange. Robert Corsini's on here, who's a filmmaker, and he did a wonderful job filming it. Jody Armour is a pretty famous USC law professor who recruited a bunch of young hip hop people who created new pieces directed toward Assange. And we've been in communication with Jody Armour to take another event, particularly try to go to USC School of Journalism. But we have connections to other. I mean, Vinny recently tabled at PCC, Pasadena City College. So that's another thing. And if any people are interested in helping out with that, with ideas or participation, either with more webinars, we've done some really wonderful work on that, or some in-person things, contact us. You can contact us through that message that went out, the announcement for tonight's event.
Yeah, and I would just add to thank you for that, Dick, because it reminds me of something. I don't know where all of you are from who are on this. I know you're not all from LA. So feel free also to raise your hand and say, well, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and frankly, we're not doing anything. Or there are three of us and we're thinking of getting started. What should we do? I mean, in other words,
Jim, I have a suggestion that might save us a great deal of time. If everyone would go into the chat and put your name and your location so we can follow up with you thereafter.
Good.
I think that'll make it much easier, and that way we can save the chat. And if you wish to save the chat, you click on the three buttons and save the chat at the end of the webinar, and you'll be able to save that and keep it for yourself, so you'll know who is in your area, and we'll know how we can reach out to you. Now, Robert, go ahead. You have your hand
Robert,
up.
you're next, Robert.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Vinny, a couple really specific things. Since you've been doing so much traveling now, different places, engaging with audiences and so forth, have you noticed? And you went to the UK. Have you noticed anything in the demographics of the people who are attending these events?
I'll give a perfect example. I spoke at up in Berkeley, a Free Mumia, Free Assange, Free Palestine event, and it was put together by one of the fellow members of our coalition, Jeff Mackler. This Jeff has been doing this for 60 years. He has been an effective organizer, and unfortunately, he put together an event and he expected to have somewhere to the neighborhood to 600 to 700 people show up. And it was supported by something like 40 different progressive groups, and 100 people show up. And it was basically the usual suspects. It looked a great deal like this meeting. A slightly older demographic, a more progressive demographic. It was a multicultural demographic, of course, but I believe what Quanta said is absolutely correct. We need to find a way to reach out and engage with the youth, because they're the ones who are more so than the rest of us are going to be dead in short order. They're the ones that are going to have to live with the loss of freedom of the press and the loss of investigative journalism. And the way we've done this is by going to college campuses and asking, Jan, I see your hand up. Go ahead, please.
It's Vinny. I don't mind if you want to. I'm not being difficult. If you want to chair the meeting, it's okay.
No. I'm sorry about that, Jim.
Okay.
It's my
Jan,
obsessive compulsive nature.
I know. Jan, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with looking around for young journalists, but I feel so strongly that journalism has changed so much. I'm a person of the 60s. That was journalism. And I think that I feel the way I do sometimes when I go shopping. The people that wait on me know nothing about the products. They only know how to run the cash register. And I feel like that's what journalists are becoming too. They know how to write. They don't know what to write. And they certainly aren't investigative. And I wonder if we can find people like Glenn Greenwald and Naomi Klein and people at The Intercept and Jessica Valente, and people who are still alive to lead that group of young people, teach them what journalism is like and how you do step out of your safety zone when you're a journalist. And I don't think journalists are doing that anymore. I don't know where we'd be if it weren't for those courageous people like Daniel Ellsberg and Ellen Goodman and Molly Ivins and so many, and Bernstein,
Mhm,
and Woodward, where would we be?
mhm. No, thank you
I
for
just
that. You're
wanted to
quite, you're
say-
quite right. Excuse me, Robert, just
Yeah.
raise your hand. I'll
Just I
call.
want to add,
Robert,
I
excuse
absolutely
me,
understand.
Robert, Robert, could you stop? Only because I know how these meetings go. I gather your hand was up? I'm now calling on you.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I just want to add that in terms of journalism then and now, different eras, I would say, there are young people doing great journalism today. I mean, I think you'll see, follow Politico, the people they bring on MSNBC, I have to say, not to be partisan, it's just when you listen to these Washington Post journalists, Maggie Haberman from the New York Times, these people are doing amazing work. And, Glenn Greenwald, certainly in his own right, there's some pros and cons there. I've generally always appreciated him. But I think there are people doing good journalism. WikiLeaks is an example of a new journalism itself. So I think that's, we were talking about it earlier, that Julian Assange, it remains a threat to the status quo. That's why he's still in prison, right? So he is a threat. WikiLeaks is a threat. Journalism is a threat. And they're trying to find their ways to undermine it and drown it. And that's the challenge. Reaching young people now at this kind who are now who achieved the mainstream status in any way in journalism, and getting them to connect with a story is not easy, because it risks their career in their own right. So there are a lot of forces in play in what this is all about. And that's why we're all so committed to it over all this time.
Yeah, but I think Jan's point, because if you're talking about journalists in the print media, well, that still carries a certain weight that online stuff sadly doesn't. Next is Carmeletta, and then Brenda. Carmeletta.
Yes, I just wanted to say hello to everyone, and thank you for assembling such a team. I think this is an amazing group of people. I did attend the event at UCLA, and that's how I discovered the plight of Assange. And for me, I like to say I'm in the other demographic, just beneath you guys. But I think for me, what would be helpful is just to get that list of journalists that you guys spoke about, so that I can start to learn those people and see what they're doing, and just talk about them amongst my peer group. I think it's important to start having conversations to encourage courage, because the freedom of speech, we see what's happening here. That's why a lot of journalists probably aren't speaking out, and they have dulling themselves. So I think it's important to see the ones that are standing out, and the ones that are still exuding courage, and talk about those, and inform younger audiences of those, to serve similar to like a hero, for the people who would want to do that. But I also just wanted to say, I think another way to increase the reach would be for entities or groups like this to pair with other organizations that are in a fight for whatever it is. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, we
because
do. Yeah,
this is all the same thing. So I feel like when we begin to see, the people who were fighting for their rights not to have the COVID shot, we got to start to talk to them and say, hey, you're basically saying you want freedom. We want freedom of speech. So that's just the idea I have.
Thank you for that. Brenda, you're next.
Hi. Oh, I don't know. I just started. Okay.
That's good. You're on.
Sorry. Okay. I'm
perfect.
just going to do a shot in the dark. I actually mentioned this one time to another organization. I think graffiti artists would be so good for this cause. And what I also think is bringing back Shadow Man, Richard Hamberlin's Shadow Man would be, that's just an idea I had, because of how wonderful it was. I was in the 80s in New York City and saw one of those, and it was most stunning thing I've ever seen in my life. Of course, someone has to be able to knock off the urgency, and I don't know if you can copy an artist, but to throw Julian Assange's name across that Shadow Man or any graffiti artist. So that's my idea. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and by the way, we've experimented somewhat in LA, not around Assange, with with blasting, this is some of what you're talking about, blasting onto the side of the LA Times building, which you can get away with doing, a message about some other issue. So that's good to consider. I'm sorry, who else had their hand up? Was that you, Vinny? I can't, because it's
I
in
do.
your
Yes,
phone
I have my
numbers.
hand up.
Okay.
And Catalina and John both mentioned excellent news outlets. And when we opened this meeting up, I gave a shout out to our compatriot, Zuaid Kaufman, because she has revitalized Truthdig. What I would suggest is please read and contribute, and you'll see all of these progressive journals in the chat, and we'll be happy to send out any more of them, whether it's Consortium News, Substack, The Gray Zone. I could go on, but they produce their work essentially for free unless you choose to support them. And I would suggest do as I do. If I'm reading something and I'm getting good news, even if it's only a couple of bucks a month, I make certain I contribute to them. I might also add one excellent journal. I don't know if we can reach these people, but a group called the LA Progressive. As a matter of fact, the man in the box next to me, Dick, and his lovely wife, Sharon, are the publishers of the LA Progressive. And I would encourage you not only to read all those other journals, but to take and support them financially, because that keeps them afloat. And the next thing is, there's nothing to stop you from grabbing your word processor and typing out your own articles to raise the awareness of these issues and present them to each one of these magazines, each one of these online venues. And I'll leave
Okay,
it at
let me
that.
just say, Dick, I'm going to recognize you next, but let me just make a plea again, because this is all good. But again, I remind you that if we had the right answer, if we knew exactly what to do, other than what we're doing, which hasn't worked yet, if we knew exactly what to do as time is growing short to expedite our movement, to build our movement, to make it more powerful, to break through the government's efforts to not let people know about us and how outrageous it is, we'd have just gone off and done it, wouldn't bother you. So any idea you may have as you're sitting here listening to this, you may think, wow, this is a crazy idea. I don't care. At this point, there's no idea too crazy, too strange, that we don't want to hear about during this meeting, I can assure you. So please think about that and raise your hand. I'll be happy to call on you. Dick.
Yeah, I apologize. Since I'm the host, I can't actually raise my little yellow hand. I have to do this.
I can see everybody's hand. It's okay. And then Ann,
so I was going to say that afterwards, I think we will put out a poll to all the people on these lists, and with boxes where you can fill in your idea. You can also give us your where you are and volunteer to participate, and we can begin a communication with you. We'll get that together here in the next several days.
Dick, that's wonderful. That's brilliant. Yes, Ann.
Well, I really love hearing all the ideas from the new people on this call. And I want to say that in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that hotbed of radicalism, Milwaukee, the Unitarians and Peace Action of Wisconsin have become strong allies in supporting Julian Assange. I would say Peace Action even more than the Unitarians. But what the Unitarians have done, because I'm on the forum committee, is they have allowed Ray McGovern, Niels Meltzer, John Kiriakou, Fidel Narvaez, and now we will have on Sunday Marjorie Cohn and Deborah Herbeck, who is a plaintiff in the lawsuit against the CIA. They have allowed these people to participate in their forums and then save videos of everybody on their website. And so my goal is to reach out into kind of mainstream America to help them understand that there's been a news blackout on Julian, and what they have heard, as Niels put it so delicately, you have been deceived. So anyway, I just want to suggest that if you do have a receptive Unitarian society or Friends Society or a Peace Action group, or Veterans for Peace is another group that supports Julian here, reach out to them. in your community, and it really amplifies your voice.
100% I agree with that. I really do, and that's what we're trying to do more of, and it's really tough, and you've done a good job of it. I'm sorry, are there hands up I'm missing? Was there a hand up?
Can I just say one more
Oh,
thing?
please
and
do,
that-
Ann.
That
Please
is
do.
that the link for, so now in the past, the Unitarian Society has done a Zoom as well as in-person or hybrid, that now they've gone to just in-person or YouTube. So you can watch Sunday's event on YouTube, and I put the link in the chat.
Thank you for that, Ann. Let me see, any other hands I'm missing? Any other hands I'm missing? We are going to try to keep this meeting to about an hour, but we have some time left. I'd sure love to hear from you.
Jim, I would like
yes.
to mention one other thing, because
Please.
everybody's alluded to this briefly. And that is the idea that we are Assange defense, and we are looking for other groups to be Assange defense. But those groups like Code Pink, the UNAC, the Answer Coalition, we, as in me, are going to be reaching out to work in coalition with as many of those groups as we can, because separately we're few, collectively we're legion. And I will leave it at that, because Stephen, who's much smarter.
Steve, yes, Steve, you have your hand up.
I just want to say that the ultimate purpose of this effort is to get the Assange indictment dismissed, to drop the extradition, to let this man return to his family and his children and his life. And I've put in the chat the direct phone number and email of Merrick Garland.
Thank you.
According to our president, he doesn't, quote, interfere in DOJ matters. So supposedly Merrick Garland calls the shots. So I want to reinforce everything we've been talking about today. I'm so thrilled that there are even now 30 people on this organizing phone call. As Dick says, you will get regular notices. We will plant the seeds of local chapters of the Assange Defense Committee. But the ultimate goal is to dismiss that indictment. It is totally within the control of the Department of Justice to do that. And, that's why I put
Steve, just that somebody's not muted and they're talking and it's coming out over everything. If you could mute yourself if you're on another conference call with somebody. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, that's just my point. It's right there. And please do that. And I've put the ICUJP program tomorrow. If you learn something today, that's a 90-minute program. You will learn a lot more tomorrow with these wonderful guests. So get up a little early, depending on your time zone, and join us tomorrow morning.
Yes. I see Ann's fan. If there's nobody else, Ann, am I missing somebody? I don't see both screens at once. Just shout out if I'm missing. Otherwise, Ann.
I just want to mention to people, we started this conversation, I think Claire said that she'd spoken up about the fact that the WikiLeaks, the files were leaked to WikiLeaks. And in terms of the Mueller investigation, I just want to point out, this is page 194, where the new redactions were unredacted, starting at page 174. And that section is called Prosecution and Declination Decisions. And the unredacted pages all give the reasons why they did not indict Julian Assange or WikiLeaks, because they had no concrete evidence that would stand up to indict them. So if somebody talks to you about this, this is one piece of evidence you can throw at them. A second is that Sean Henry, who was the president of CrowdStrike, on December 5th, 2017, in a House Special Committee, under oath stated that he saw no emails exfiltrated by Russia or by anybody else. And that was kept under wraps by Adam Schiff until it was finally exposed, I don't know exactly when. So there are reasons for saying that, you know, this was not a hack.
And Ann, please send those to us. Make sure we've seen them here in LA. Send
Okay,
them-
I'll put the chat. I'll put it in the
put
chat.
it in the chat. But if you could also just send it around to anybody you can, that would be great. We do have a few minutes left. Still interested to know what people think. By the way, if I may just go back to one point that Vinny and I have been talking about, I guess both online and offline. He mentioned at the beginning, Vinny, the idea that we're not in a position yet, they were in England, obviously. They managed to get 6,000 to 10,000 people around the parliament. If we had that kind of mass movement in the United States today, I think we'd all know damn well what to do with it. But we don't yet have that. We're trying to build it as quickly as we can because time is of the essence here. And one way that Vinny and I have thought, in addition to everything else we're all doing, might be to have some, as Vinny put it, direct action, quite rightly so, direct action, where people, in fact, get arrested. Now, it would be good to have the people that are getting arrested be people of some note in their locale so that the press might be inclined to cover it. And it's in that spirit that I suggested, well, maybe we want to go and get ourselves locked in somewhere at CNN or at the LA Times. Maybe people want to do that at their newspapers around the country. The Justice Department, Merrick Garland, who's put out this all new guidelines for what's going to govern the Justice Department, is violating them when it comes to Julian Assange. And maybe therefore we want to lock ourselves into the federal building here. What do people think might be good targets at this point? Is it pretty obvious, or are there some other places we're not thinking of that might be good targets to bring a few people to, either in a CD action or some sort of nice delegation from the community that might mean something? Anybody have a thought on that? All right, that's okay. No,
I was going to say,
yes, please, Robert.
you know, it's like the mainstay, Hollywood and Highland, direct action.
Yeah.
You want people to see it. That's a place to do it. You want all ages. Who yawn, you know, who goes to CNN? Who gives a fuck about CNN or LA Times? LA Times is an empty fucking building next to the airport right now. So that gets us nowhere. But visibility and promotability in a really highly popular location, that's where we need to go. Right in front of Jimmy, wherever they are, you know, places in Hollywood Boulevard, we can certainly make, I mean, that's where the world looks there to, you know, when they think America, well, let's go there.
Hollywood, right? Hollywood. Jimmy Kimmel.
Hollywood, baby.
Yeah, all right. I'm sorry. Somebody else was trying to speak, I think. Vinny, hold on a second. Did I see somebody else? Just speak up if I'm missing you. All right, Vinny.
So what I would do is, following up what Robert said, I think that's an excellent idea. Chaining ourselves together in the center of Hollywood and Highland certainly would get the local news paying attention if we stop the traffic. And so what I would ask you is think about, whether you're here locally or you're elsewhere, what we can do to force them to pay attention to us.
That's the idea.
That is it exactly. And I don't expect everybody to come up with an answer right now, but think about it and reach out to us and let us know. And if anything we can do to support your efforts, we will. Second thing, Stephen was good enough to put the numbers for Merrick Garland, but if you go to the Assange Defense Org website, there are links that will take you to the president, to Merrick Garland, and to Anthony Blink, and allow you to write directly to them. Write early, write often.
Dick?
Yeah, as a parallel effort, I think we might redouble our efforts to hook in celebrities, since we're here in California. Some of us know people. I mean, if Dick and Sharon get arrested and go to jail, nobody's going to notice. But I will say that we are going to chain ourselves in front of the offices of LA Progressive one of these days.
We'll get someone to pay attention.
Well, I'll get somebody
Dick,
whose
I
article
thought
you
you
didn't publish.
Dick, I thought you were chained to the LA Progressive.
Well, Sharon's got him chained, but he means out front, not inside working. Yeah. Anybody else here? I'm sorry, we're just about out of time. That is a great idea. Yeah, it's true. Well, but okay, so Hollywood, but wherever you may live, there may be a celebrity, a quote unquote celebrity, or somebody that's prominent. Maybe it's a local author, local professor, a local whatever that you think you could sit down and talk to and convince. Yes, did somebody else have their hand up, wanted to speak on
I
this?
don't see one, Jim.
Okay, good. Well, then what we're going to do is we're going to do this. This isn't a one-off. I mean, when we have our meetings now in LA, which they're not necessarily regular, for a while they were, but now we do them to suit when we need to, when we're working on something, as we are right now. We will call these meetings, and we will always call them with enough notice so that all of you that have signed on today, we hope will come back. Maybe you've come today, heard what you've heard, and said, well, it's great and it's interesting and all, but I've got 6 other things I'm doing. Okay, we understand that, but maybe you've been inspired, or maybe you, because you're here in the first place, to work on this issue. It's critically important. If he gets extradited back to the United States and stands trial in the particular district in Virginia where he would stand trial, it's his conviction is certain. The imprisonment in which he would be placed would kill him, frankly. It kills many people. So it's now, one could argue that once he's back in this country, it'll be easier to promote actions about him. Yeah, maybe not. The point is, we've got to do all we can do now to stop that extradition if we can, and to have a strong enough movement so that if Damity is sent back here, we're on the ground running with good things to do here. So please do join us at our future meetings if you can. Go to the, if you haven't already done so, to the website that Dick or Vinny or somebody just mentioned, the national website. Go there, learn all you can about the Assange case. I think the more you learn about it, and the more you read what some people have had to say about it, frankly, the more you'll be inspired to do something about it. I'm not going to preach right now. I will preach a little tomorrow at our seminar tomorrow morning. You can't really have a democracy without a free press. Not in for any length of time, not a real democracy. It's no secret that our own democracy is hanging on by a thread. And therefore, the need to save investigative journalism, honest journalism, free press journalism, and Assange is at the moment the poster person for that, is essential. Therefore, it's not just saving some abstract right. It's not just saving some person you may never have met. It's saving the democracy in America. So I believe. So please continue to join us. We're so thank you that you joined us today. And we hope to see you again at our next meeting, which won't be far from now, won't be long from now.
Jim, before we go,
yes,
I placed
please.
all of my contact information in the chat. That includes my home address if you wish to send pizzas to my house to annoy me. But the reason is I am the national organizing director. Jeez. So if you are attempting something here, you need assistance, whether it's tabletoppers, literature, or anything else, feel free to call or email me anyway. I am an obsessive compulsive, so I have to get back to you. Otherwise, I break out into hives, and I make you this commitment. If you don't hear from me in less than 24 hours, send my wife flowers because I'm dead.
Yeah, that's not posting. That's the truth, friends. And nothing bothers him. I've tried to bother him. He gets under my skin. He's so nice, but you can't bother him really. So just send him anything you want, ask him anything you want, and he'll help you out. Any other last quick thoughts before we let everybody go about their night? Thank you again so much. We're really buoyed by your presence and encouraged by your presence. We thank you very much, really. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
Thank you all. Thank you very, very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.